For those of you just turning in, Jacen and Diana with Hawthorne Union, we are in the middle of doing a series about the current state of coaching. And for those of you looking to get an ICF credential, or for those of you that are looking for a coach, we are kind of doing a little mini series about a few topics relative to ICF coaching. And right now we're going to talk about why get an ICF credential.
So I think first and foremost, it can be a confusing landscape because coaching as a field is not regulated. And there's also there can be mixed messages based on how things are labeled. So even if someone gets an ICF credential, which is a credential from the International Coaching Federation, it's an American-based company. So we do see a dominance of kind of American coaches, but there are ICF credentialed coaches worldwide, and that number grows by the day, if not, by the year, if not by the day. So it's not the only credentialing body, but it is one of, at least in America, it's the most well-known. And when people see on job descriptions, ACC, PCC, MCC, that is a reference to the International Coaching Federation, also known as the ICF. What's confusing, though, is PCC stands for Professional Certified Coach, but what it actually means is a credentialed coach. So you can get a certification anywhere. You can take a class for an hour and get a certification. Now, that certification is not necessarily the same as a coach that spends a year or multiple years building up their practice over time to get a credential. So that's the difference between the certification and credential. One of the things we talk about in coaching landscape, though, is that that's not necessarily a guarantee that you get clients. We have amazing coaches out there, consultants out there who don't have an ICF credential. That's getting harder over time because the ICF credential is becoming not just what the ICF calls the gold standard, but becoming the norm. But it's still a possibility. So I think the thing is that if you're pursuing ICF credential, this is a time investment, it's a money investment. Your clients may not care. If you're going to work with companies and you're kind of going to work with HR professionals or want to work for a contract company, then credentialing is usually a basic kind of key to enter. But I think before people embark on this journey to learn, because also becoming a coach, you have to look in the mirror, you have to deal with your own stuff, changes how you communicate, changes how you show up. I think people need to know what their why is, because you may or may not find the why in your marketplace at this point in your career. And so one of the things to consider is whether you want a credential now or if it's something later. But I think for more established coaches who've been coaching and they already have a client base and they already have a referral network, it maybe is less of an issue. For coaches that are just starting out and looking to kind of make their way into the market or be competitive with more experienced coaches, the credential could be helpful.
For the most part, from my experience, is that the people who are doing just direct coaching or engaging with people directly, that's not a common question. Is what's my background? What's my education? What's my credential? Anytime I do work with another business or another professional, that's when it comes up. And one of the other things that I brought in our last video, we talked about the 2023 ICF Global Coaching Study, is that now about 80% of all coaches agree that their clients expect them to have some sort of certification or credential. And I don't think just, hey, I took LinkedIn Learning's coaching certification is going to cut the mustard, as they say.
And that's the thing. It may in certain circles, especially if you're at LinkedIn, right? And I do know that LinkedIn has credentialed coaches, so perhaps that's not the case. But I think, and this may be my perspective. There are some people that'll go from an academic perspective to say, look, have a credential in the field, dedicate to your field. Part of the ICF ethics is one of the ethics is that coaches continually professionally develop. So if a coach is ICF credentialed, they've committed to the ethics, they have to do continuing education. There's a rigorous set of exams and tests and mentoring that are required. There's multiple different levels. So there is a quality control element. But at the same time, my clients only know that I'm credentialed because I tell them that I'm credentialed, because that helped me secure my clients. So I think that people really need to look at it from a sales perspective. Is this something, as you look at your career trajectory, that you think that you're going to need? Do you just want it? Do you think you need it? It's not a problem if you're going for the credential either way. But since we're looking at an investment of, on the lower side, 3,500 to 6,000, on the higher side, 10, 20, perhaps even more. And a lot of those coaches will get certificates, but not even go through the ICF credential or get the ICF credential and then not renew it. At least from my perspective, and we talk about this a lot at Hawthorne Union, is, what's your business case for that? And that may not be motivating to people, and that doesn't have to be the reason. But that's one of the things I look at as a mentor coach is, of course, we want to continue learning, but there are free ways to continue learning. And this is a more kind of, it's a commitment.
Most often, probably who wouldn't be a good fit is for someone who's doing this casually. If you're doing direct just to consumers, those things aren't where an ICF credential is required, right? The leader that occasionally brings out a coaching tactic in a one-on-one. But if you are an HR professional, if you're a consultant and you are doing dedicated coaching sessions, this is something to really look at, right? Of course, you can project manage without a project management certificate. You can be an HR professional without your SHRM or HRCI, but when you get that gold standard, it certainly talks about your dedication and your investment, and it feels good. It's
Yeah.
also a personal accomplishment as well.
I think one thing to consider just from a future planning perspective. So this video is from 2023. So you want to check the kind of requirements on this. But currently, in order if you're pursuing a credential through the International Coaching Federation, your coaching hours only start day 1 of your ICF approved program. There is a kind of another way. If you have attended a program of, let's say, 30 hours that taught you how to coach, and it wasn't ICF approved, it's still worth applying. And we have a separate video on that because I get a lot of questions about that. And I think it's important that people get credit for their coaching education. But one of the things to think about, even if you're thinking coaching may be a retirement plan for you, if you do end up wanting to start an ICF approved program, it can be worth starting now because it starts your clock on those client hours. And we'll talk about that in the other videos. But that's just food for thought. If this is on a wish list for you, it may be worth looking into programs or starting because a lot of times, what is a barrier for professionals, especially if they're looking to, they want to retire early or they're looking to go to retirement, they've done all of this coaching in their organizations, but the coaching doesn't necessarily count for a credential. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But I think it's important that we get credit for what we do, but the ICF has a strong definition of what coaching is that separates it out from these other methodologies. So we're happy to answer questions about that. That's part of why we're making this series, but that's just a food for thought. If you think you'll be a coach someday, then it may be something where you want to actually start the clock on that process sooner versus later.
So for those of you watching this video and you do have questions or trying to figure out if this is a good fit for you, feel free to drop us a question in the comments and we'll try to get back to you. Diana, anything else on why an ICF credential?
Yeah, so I really think at this point, it's a personal choice. How that's changed though since over the last like 10 years since I had this conversation with coaches that were interested is now it's becoming more the norm and the standard. I anticipate that that will continue to become the norm and standard over time. One thing to think about, there's people that I respect highly that think that coaching at some point will become a regulated field. When I moved to Nashville 10 years ago, actually, there was something that the ICF chapter in Nashville had actually challenged to keep certain regulations about coaching off the ballot, and they had rallied together and kind of addressed that. So there is legislation that pops up at some points. Currently at this point, ICF credential or credentialing is not required. However, sometimes there's a kind of how do we share this schoolyard? How do we make sure that there's quality out there in coaching? There are some people that talk about this being something that becomes regulated. That's not something I necessarily see happening, but at the same time, if if you think regulation is on the horizon or you want to get a jump on regulation or have started your clock kind of before then, that's something to consider. So it's a personal choice and it's becoming more common and it's not regulated at this point.
I would agree. I don't know if regulation is around the corner, but I would say that as coaching grows in popularity, and as you see a lot of different types of coaching entering the market, it's going to be the one thing that stands out as a differential. It's going to be your competitive edge. If the numbers are telling us anything that, hey, there's money here, it's a growing industry, I would expect to see more and more people enter it. And that's one of the things that's going to give you that upper edge.
I would say if you are credentialed, advertise that. Lead with that because, that becomes a way, just like if you're really into social media or you have a very strong network or if you have a very strong background or experience, it's important that we lead with our strengths. So this does become like a degree, like a master's degree. The credential is oftentimes kind of that commitment, and it's a way to differentiate yourself from other coaches.